And so today I wanted to let you know the good parts of owning a freeze dryer and the more challenging parts of owning a freeze dryer. I found this really helpful when I was looking into getting a freeze dryer myself to know what real people thought of the product. Well, hey, welcome back. If this is your first time here, my name is Brianna, and my husband Gray and I live a slow life at home, learning, practicing, and teaching our children traditional skills. We have had our Harvest Right freeze dryer for about a year and a half. We got it for Christmas, not this last Christmas, but the Christmas before, and so we have had a lot of freeze drying under our belt, and today I wanted to let you know what we think of it so far. Before I jump into our thoughts about the freeze dryer in general, I did want to mention, because I see this come up again and again on the blog and in social media posts, that freeze drying is not the same as dehydrating. I think that there's a little bit of confusion because both of them dry the food, but freeze drying is a completely different process than dehydrating. Dehydrating is simply just removing the moisture at a really low temperature, which we also do here on our homestead. But freeze drying has a whole different process, and you end up with a completely different product than a dehydrated food. So take, for example, a dehydrated grape. A dehydrated grape would be a raisin. A freeze-dried grape, it kind of holds its shape a little bit better than a raisin, and the color is almost completely maintained. And the thing about freeze drying is that it makes your food last a lot longer than a dehydrated food. So our rule of thumb here on the homestead is that we keep our dehydrated foods for about a year, and then our freeze drying foods, if we pack them in Mylar with oxygen absorbers, those are tucked away in our long-term food storage pantry and will be good for a really long time. Dehydration shrinks the food and changes the texture, which of course is exactly what you want when making something like jerky. But freeze-dried foods retain their original size, shape, and color. So freeze drying works by first freezing the food to about -40 degrees Fahrenheit, then creating a super powerful vacuum that seals the machine, and it vaporizes the ice crystals entirely and leaves you with a thoroughly dried, extremely shelf-stable food. So freeze-dried food keeps much more of its texture, nutrition, and taste than dehydrated food. It's very light and airy. No matter what you're freeze-drying, it's very crispy and light and airy. When it comes to actually consuming the freeze-dried food, you can eat it as is or rehydrate it. So with the whole meals that we make, we usually rehydrate those. Things like fruit, we typically will eat as snacks because the kids just can't get enough of them. Things like, we recently just did watermelon, and to be honest, I was kind of skeptical about watermelon. I thought, like, what's the point? But it was so good, and I think I'm gonna do a post about freeze-dried watermelon because they tasted like watermelon candies. They were really good, and so you will be seeing that maybe sometime next week. Let's go into the pros and the cons of the freeze dryer. So let's start with the pros. The first thing is that the Harvest Right freeze dryer is really easy to use. You almost can't mess it up as long as you follow a few key points. Because the machine is super intuitive, it kind of walks you through the entire process. So the little screen will literally tell you, now close the drain vent, now, press start, and it lets you know exactly what's going on, what stage you are in the process. And so the ease of use is definitely the first good thing about the Harvest Right freeze dryer. The second thing is that food is way more nutritious. So as much as I love canning, and I do a lot of canning and will continue to can, freeze drying definitely has been a big part of our preservation process because the food is so nutritious and you just can't beat that. The next thing is that freeze-dried food lasts a really long time. And so for people like us who want to build up a pantry that will last a long time and kind of get ahead of that inflation curve, having food that is shelf stable for a long time is very desirable. And so we like to just make extra freeze-dried food and then tuck it away on the shelf, and it will stay there for a long time. Plus, it's a lot more cost effective than if you, say, buy the freeze-dried foods. So we found ourselves buying freeze-dried strawberries and freeze-dried, what else did the kids like? I think it was think it was mangoes. I think they always ask me to buy mangoes. Anyways, those are extremely expensive in the store. So yes, the freeze dryer is very expensive. However, if you're buying freeze-dried food in the store, that is even more expensive, but at smaller doses. So the next thing is that I think that having a freeze dryer really reduces food waste. So rather than letting all your leftovers go to waste, you can just pop it in the freeze dryer and have a single served meal of lasagna, for example, or pizza, or literally anything that you would make for dinner. You can just put on a freeze dryer tray and save that, and it makes it completely shelf stable if you aren't going to be eating leftovers in the next couple days. The next point is that freeze-dried food really tastes good. It's a lot of fun experimenting with different types of food and just seeing what it tastes like compared to fresh, dehydrated, frozen, and freeze-dried. It's really fun to just experiment and try foods in different ways. And the last point before we move on to the things we don't like about owning a freeze dryer is that it is one of the easiest ways that I preserve food. It is really as simple as putting the food on the tray and pushing a button. And I really like that. Now, probably the moment you've all been waiting for, these are the things that we really don't like about the Harvest Right freeze dryer. And the first one is that it is really loud. If we didn't have the space that we do to have the freeze dryer not in our main living space, this might have been a deal breaker for me. I think that the freeze dryer needs to go in a garage, in a spare bedroom, in somewhere that's not your main living space, because it is very frustrating to talk over the noise level. I took some footage before I turned my freeze dryer off to let you know kind of the sound level. So listen to how it sounds when it is on and I'm trying to talk to you. As you can see, I have my freeze dryer behind me and it's currently in its drying phase, and this is about the volume that you could expect. It's pretty loud. I find that when we're in here, I don't necessarily want to have a conversation over the level of noise that it is. And this is the sound it makes when the freeze dryer is venting and defrosting. So as soon as you remove the food from the trays, you have this sound. So it's really hard to have a conversation over the noise level. So the way to get around that is just to have a setup in your garage, spare bedroom, storage space, somewhere you can shut a door. Trust me, you will not want to skip this step. The second reason is that they take up a lot of space. This is a major appliance. We have a large freeze dryer and it's the size of a small, dishwasher at least. Even the small ones are quite large. I have the dimensions on the corresponding blog post if you want to know exactly how big these machines are, but they're pretty big. They're a huge appliance that if you don't expect that, you could get it home and not know what I'm going to do with this. So they are big, they are a major appliance. We find it worth it because they are a powerhouse for us in food preservation and they do a lot of work. So, but I would definitely want you to know that they are very big. And the last and probably the biggest con for most people, I would assume, is that they are expensive. Home freeze dryers right now they're pretty penny, and we had wanted a freeze dryer for probably about 5 years. Gray really wanted it. I didn't even know what a freeze dryer was, but for about 5 years before we got ours, Gray really wanted a freeze dryer and kept saying we should get a freeze dryer. There's a lot of cool things you can do with them. And then we justified it at Christmas time for both of us. And so we got ours only about 1.5 years ago, but they really are expensive, and that is definitely a con. Now that we've talked about the pros and the cons, I wanted to close the video by talking about some of the frequently asked questions that I personally get on my social media, my blog, and my email. So the first question that I get a lot of is, should I get the oilless pump or the oiled pump where you have to oil it? And I can only go off of what we personally have. We have the oil-less pump, so we don't have to worry about oiling it. Now, there are some mixed opinions about that, and that I would say just do your own research. I can tell you that we have the oil-free pump. It's definitely an upgrade. It really upped the price for us. But I justified it in not really wanting to have one more thing on my to-do list because I'm so busy. I thought, you know, if I can take that off my plate, let's go with the oil-free pump. And so far, we've been really happy with it. Our machines worked great and we haven't had any kind of maintenance issues. The next question that I get is, what kind of foods can you freeze dry? And it really is basically anything. You don't want to freeze dry anything like pure chocolate or honey with a high fat only sugar content, but you can freeze dry fruits, vegetables, meats, whole meals, dairy, desserts. There's more things that you can freeze dry than you can't. Is it worth it? That's the question that I get above all. Is it worth it? And I won't be able to answer that for you. I will say that if you are a homesteader or aspiring homesteader, a gardener, a backpacker, a hiker, a prepper, someone who just loves food and loves to try different foods, someone that's budget conscious, or someone that's already purchasing like freeze-dried meal kits or those like emergency buckets, I would lean to say yes. However, you are going to have to be the one to decide if it's worth it for you. So if you want more information, I have much more information in the corresponding blog post. I will leave the link down below. If you have any questions, I would love for you to leave a comment and I will get to those and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will see you next time.